On the quiet streets of Cleveland, Ohio, a simple two-story home sat unnoticed, its windows dark, its secrets sealed behind locked doors. For more than a decade, 3 young women were held captive inside, missing from their families but hidden in plain sight. Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus. 3 names that would haunt a community and shock the world. Their disappearances seemed random. Their cases, unconnected. But behind the walls of Ariel Castro's house, a nightmare was unfolding, one built on manipulation, missed warnings, and unimaginable survival. This is the untold story of courage, resilience, and the moment a single scream broke a decade of silence. This is the Cleveland Kidnappings, Ariel Castro's house of captivity. Cleveland, Ohio, in the early 2000s, was a city like many others in America. Residential neighborhoods were quiet, streets were familiar to the residents, and the community had a sense of normalcy. People went about their daily lives, children walked to school, and families felt relatively safe. However, over a period of 2 years, the city would experience a series of mysterious disappearances that would shake the community and leave lasting questions about safety and vigilance. The first disappearance occurred on August 23, 2002, when 21-year-old Michelle Knight vanished from her home. Initially, her family and the police believed that she might have run away. At the time, Michelle had personal struggles that made this assumption plausible. Nevertheless, her family reported her missing, and the case was officially opened. Despite initial efforts, the investigation did not yield immediate results. There were no clear leads, no witnesses, and Michelle's disappearance remained a troubling mystery. Less than a year later, in April 2003, Amanda Berry, who was 16 at the time, disappeared while walking home from her part-time job. Her sudden disappearance caused immediate alarm among her family and friends. Local authorities began an investigation, issuing missing person alerts and coordinating searches in the area. Amanda's disappearance drew media attention, highlighting concerns about the safety of young women in the community. A year after that, in April 2004, Gina De Jesus, age 14, went missing while walking home from school. Her disappearance added to the growing concern among Cleveland residents. By this time, the public was aware of multiple young women missing within the city, but authorities continued to treat each case as separate. The connections between the 3 cases were not yet understood, and the families of the missing women were left to navigate a difficult and uncertain period. Over the next decade, all 3 women were held captive in the same house on Seymour Avenue, a modest residential property that appeared ordinary to neighbors and passers-by. The house was unassuming, blending into the neighborhood, which made it difficult for anyone to suspect the horrors occurring inside. For years, neighbors reported occasional strange noises or unusual activity, but none of these reports led to the discovery of the captives. This chapter also examines the early investigations and the challenges faced by law enforcement. While police conducted searches and followed up on leads, there were gaps in the process. Each missing person report was treated individually, and systemic issues contributed to the inability to identify a connection between the cases. The family struggled with frustration and fear, attending community meetings, distributing flyers, and making public appeals for information. The disappearances of Michelle, Amanda, and Gina also had a profound effect on the local community. Parents became more cautious, children were warned about strangers, and neighborhoods became more vigilant. Yet, despite this increased awareness, the captor remained undetected, continuing his control over the victims in isolation. In reflecting on these early events, it becomes clear how small missteps, combined with appearances of normalcy, allowed the captor to operate undetected. The case would later reveal that even in a well-populated neighborhood, a predator could conceal his actions for years. The disappearances of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus marked the beginning of a story that would unfold over more than a decade. While the community searched for answers, the victims were trapped in a hidden world, waiting for an opportunity to escape. This chapter sets the stage for the investigation, the eventual rescue, and the lessons learned about vigilance, awareness, and the resilience of the human spirit. After the disappearances of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus, the neighborhood surrounding Seymour Avenue in Cleveland began to experience a growing sense of unease. Families who had once felt secure now questioned the safety of their streets, their homes, and their children. The community's normal routine had been disrupted by fear and uncertainty. Residents started paying closer attention to their surroundings. Parents warned their children not to walk alone, and local schools implemented stricter safety measures. Neighborhood watch groups became more active, and the local media began reporting on the series of disappearances with increasing intensity. Flyers and posters of missing girls appeared on telephone poles, storefronts, and community centers, serving as a constant reminder of the ongoing crisis. Despite these heightened precautions, the perpetrators remained hidden. Ariel Castro, the man responsible for the abductions, maintained a facade of normalcy. To neighbors, he appeared as an ordinary resident, friendly, quiet, and unassuming. His presence in the neighborhood did not raise suspicion, and the house where he held the victims blended seamlessly with the surrounding homes. The authorities also faced challenges. Each disappearance was initially treated as a separate investigation, with limited evidence to suggest a connection. Police conducted interviews, followed up on leads, and searched the areas surrounding the victims' last known locations. However, without concrete evidence, the investigations were slow to progress. These difficulties contributed to the growing frustration among families and the community. Community response during this period was significant. Residents shared information, organized searches, and attended public meetings to discuss safety concerns. Local radio and television stations broadcast appeals for information, while social media began to play a role in spreading awareness. The sense of solidarity among neighbors was strong, but so was the anxiety that a predator was living among them, unnoticed and unchallenged. This chapter also explores the psychological impact of living in fear. Children were no longer allowed to roam freely. Adults watched unfamiliar activity with suspicion, and the neighborhood became more insular. The ordinary sounds of daily life, doors opening, footsteps on sidewalks, or passing cars, were now viewed with caution. A once trusted community environment had transformed into one of vigilance and tension. While the neighborhood remained on edge, Ariel Castro continued his control over the victims inside his home. The outside world remained unaware of the extent of their suffering. Calls to law enforcement, reports from neighbors, and sightings of unusual activity went unconnected to the disappearances, leaving the captives isolated for years. By examining the community's experience during this time, it becomes clear how ordinary neighborhoods can conceal extraordinary crimes. The combination of appearances, assumptions, and limited evidence allowed the captor to operate undetected. The story of this neighborhood illustrates the challenges faced by communities and authorities in identifying threats and protecting vulnerable individuals. The neighborhood of Cleveland was on edge, living in a state of heightened alert while the true danger remained hidden. Fear, vigilance, and uncertainty became part of daily life, yet no one knew the full extent of the horror occurring in plain sight. This chapter sets the stage for understanding how appearances can be deceiving, and how a community's watchfulness alone may not be enough to prevent tragedy. Ariel Castro, the man responsible for the abductions of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus, was a figure who appeared ordinary to those around him. To neighbors, friends, and co-workers, he was a familiar presence, a local school bus driver, a man known for his calm demeanor, and someone who participated in community activities. His outward appearance and routine behavior masked the severity of the crimes he would commit. Castro's ability to maintain a normal facade was key to his control over the victims. He carefully concealed his actions, presenting himself as trustworthy and unthreatening. Neighbors rarely saw signs of unusual behavior, and the house on Seymour Avenue looked like any other home in the neighborhood. Its modest exterior offered no indication of the horrors inside, which allowed him to operate without attracting suspicion for years. Despite his outward normalcy, Castro displayed manipulative and controlling behavior that would later be revealed through investigations and survivor accounts. He selected his victims deliberately, exploiting their vulnerabilities, and maintained strict control over them through threats, isolation, and psychological manipulation. Each act of abduction was methodical, calculated to prevent detection and maintain power over the women. The victims' families struggled to understand how someone living in their community could carry out such acts unnoticed. Castro's dual existence, appearing harmless in public while committing severe crimes in private, highlighted the challenges of identifying predators based solely on appearances. Castro's role as a bus driver provided him with knowledge of the local area and routines, which may have contributed to his ability to evade suspicion. His familiarity with the community created a sense of trust that he exploited to gain access to his victims and control their lives. Investigators later noted that his outward behavior did not align with the severity of his crimes, making it difficult for anyone to suspect his involvement early on. This chapter also examines the psychological tactics used by Castro to maintain control over the victims. He isolated them from outside contact, monitored their movements, and enforced strict rules to prevent any attempt at escape. Over time, these measures reinforced a sense of fear and dependence among the captives. The victim's ability to survive was continually tested by the environment he created. The combination of Castro's ordinary appearance, his knowledge of the neighborhood, and his calculated methods allowed him to avoid detection for over a decade. Law enforcement and community members alike were left unaware of the extent of his crimes, demonstrating how deceptive appearances can be and how predators can exploit societal assumptions. Ariel Castro's story serves as a reminder that danger can hide behind a familiar face. His ability to blend into the community delayed justice and allowed the victims to endure years of captivity. Understanding the methods he used provides insight into the challenges faced by both communities and law enforcement in preventing and identifying crimes hidden in plain sight. Michelle Knight was the first of the 3 women abducted by Ariel Castro. She disappeared on August 23, 2002, at the age of 21. At the time, her family and the authorities initially believed that she might have run away. Michelle had faced personal challenges, and these circumstances contributed to the assumption that her disappearance could be voluntary. However, the reality was far more serious. Michelle's abduction marked the beginning of a long period of captivity that would last more than a decade. She was taken to Castro's home on Seymour Avenue, where he exerted complete control over her life. The house, a seemingly ordinary residence, became a prison. Michelle was isolated from the outside world and subjected to both physical and psychological control. For years, Michelle endured extreme conditions. She was confined to locked rooms, restricted in movement, and deprived of freedom. Her communication with the outside world was completely cut off. Despite these circumstances, Michelle demonstrated remarkable resilience. She adapted to her environment and found ways to survive under constant surveillance and control. During her captivity, Michelle was often forced into difficult and dangerous situations. Castro's methods included manipulation, threats, and enforced routines designed to maintain power over her. Michelle's ability to remain alive and resist complete despair required both mental strength and perseverance. Her role as the first captive was significant in the dynamic within the house. She became an unintended anchor for the other victims who would later join her. Her experiences and the lessons she learned in the early years of captivity would shape the survival strategies of all 3 women. Michelle's story also highlights the difficulties faced by law enforcement in missing person cases. Because her disappearance was initially considered voluntary, early investigative efforts were limited. Over time, her case received less attention in the media compared to the later disappearances of Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus, which meant that for years, Michelle's plight remained largely unknown to the public. Despite being overlooked, Michelle's survival was crucial. She endured years of abuse and isolation, demonstrating extraordinary resilience. Her ability to withstand the conditions imposed by Castro laid the groundwork for eventual communication and mutual support between the captives when Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus were later brought into the house. Michelle Knight's story is one of survival in extreme circumstances. Though initially forgotten and overlooked, her endurance and resilience would become a central part of the narrative when the 3 women ultimately found a way to escape. Her experience reminds us of the hidden strength that can persist even in the most dire situations. On April 21, 2003, less than a year after Michelle Knight's disappearance, 16-year-old Amanda Berry was abducted while walking home from her part-time job at Burger King. She was a bright, outgoing teenager who was well-known in her community. Her sudden disappearance shocked her family, friends, and neighbors. Amanda's abduction happened in broad daylight, in a neighborhood she knew well. Her family immediately reported her missing, and police began an investigation. Despite these efforts, no immediate leads were found, and Amanda's case became another troubling missing person investigation in Cleveland. Over the next few weeks, her family and the local community launched search efforts. Flyers were distributed, and appeals for information were made through local media. Neighbors participated in organized searches, while local authorities followed up on tips and conducted interviews with anyone who might have seen something unusual. Unlike Michelle Knight's case, Amanda's disappearance attracted more public attention. The media coverage highlighted the risks faced by teenagers walking alone and brought awareness to the ongoing concern about multiple missing young women in the city. However, at the time, authorities did not realize that Amanda's abduction was connected to Michelle's case, and the investigation continued without linking the two. Amanda was taken to the house on Seymour Avenue, where she joined Michelle Knight as another captive. Inside the house, she faced similar restrictions, isolation, and control. Castro maintained strict routines, monitored the victims constantly, and used both physical and psychological tactics to keep them confined. Despite these conditions, Amanda, like Michelle, developed ways to survive and adapt to the harsh reality of her captivity. During her time in captivity, Amanda showed resourcefulness and determination. She began observing her environment carefully, noting the routines of her captor and looking for opportunities to communicate or escape. Her awareness of the house and its layout would later play a critical role in her eventual escape. Amanda's abduction also had a lasting impact on the community. Parents in Cleveland became increasingly cautious, schools reinforced safety protocols, and neighbors became more vigilant. Public concern grew as the realization set in that a dangerous individual could be operating within their city. While Amanda's disappearance was a distinct event in terms of timing and circumstances, it added to a growing pattern that would only later be understood. Her case demonstrates both the challenges law enforcement faced and the importance of community awareness in responding to missing person situations. Amanda Berry's story illustrates the sudden and unpredictable nature of abductions, and the way ordinary communities can be caught off guard. Her resilience, courage, and careful observation would later be vital in the eventual escape of all three women, highlighting her role not only as a victim but as a key figure in surviving and confronting years of captivity. In April 2004, 14-year-old Gina De Jesus disappeared while walking home from school. She was a bright and cheerful teenager, well known in her neighborhood, and described by friends and family as kind, responsible, and full of energy. Her disappearance came as a shock to her community, which was already aware of previous abductions in the area. Gina's abduction happened during the day on a familiar route she took regularly. Her family quickly reported her missing, and local authorities launched an investigation. Despite search efforts and interviews, no immediate evidence was found, and the case initially seemed to provide more questions than answers. At the time, law enforcement did not connect Gina's disappearance to the earlier abductions of Michelle Knight and Amanda Berry. Each case was treated as separate, which contributed to delays in understanding the pattern of the crimes. The absence of a connection meant that investigators had limited context and were unable to link the missing person reports effectively. Gina was taken to the house on Seymour Avenue, joining Michelle Knight and Amanda Berry as the third captive. Inside the house, she faced the same restrictions, fear, and psychological control that had been imposed on the first two victims. The house became a confined environment, with locked doors, limited movement, and constant monitoring by Ariel Castro. Despite the conditions, Gina began to adapt to her surroundings. She learned from the experiences of the other captives and developed her own strategies for coping with the isolation and control. The bond between the women grew, forming a support system that helped them endure the years of captivity. This network of shared resilience was critical in maintaining hope and the possibility of survival. The community reacted strongly to Gina's disappearance. Parents were concerned for the safety of their own children. Schools reinforced security measures, and neighborhoods increased vigilance. The growing fear emphasized the reality that a predator was active within their city, operating unnoticed and undetected for years. Gina's abduction further highlighted the challenges faced by law enforcement. With limited evidence and no apparent connections between cases, investigators were unable to uncover the truth behind the series of disappearances. The lack of visible signs or suspicious activity around the captive's residence allowed him to continue his crimes without interruption. Gina De Jesus' story is a critical part of understanding the full scope of the Cleveland kidnappings. Her abduction, like the others, illustrates how ordinary neighborhoods can conceal extraordinary crimes. The experiences of Gina, Michelle, and Amanda reveal the importance of vigilance, communication, and community awareness in responding to missing person cases. Together, their stories lay the foundation for the events that would eventually lead to freedom and justice. The house on Seymour Avenue in Cleveland appeared ordinary from the outside. Its modest two-story structure blended into the neighborhood. To neighbors and passers-by, it looked like any other residential home. Inside, however, it was the center of a decade-long captivity for Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus. Ariel Castro controlled every aspect of life within the house. Doors were locked, windows were often boarded or covered, and movement was tightly restricted. The captives were not allowed to leave, and any attempt to resist or escape was met with threats, punishment, and intimidation. Castro enforced strict routines to maintain power and control, ensuring the women were isolated from the outside world. Life inside the house was characterized by fear and uncertainty. The victims were subjected to both psychological and physical control. Castro manipulated the women, fostering dependency and discouraging hope. Communication with the outside world was impossible, which reinforced the sense of isolation and helplessness. Despite these conditions, the captives developed strategies for survival. They observed the routines of their captor, memorized the layout of the house, and quietly supported one another. Over time, a fragile bond formed among the women, creating a sense of solidarity and mutual assistance that became essential to enduring daily life. During this period, significant events occurred, including the birth of Amanda Berry's child. The presence of a child in the household added further complexity to the environment. The captives had to navigate both their own survival and the care of a child in a confined, controlled space, demonstrating resilience under extremely difficult circumstances. The psychological impact of living under constant surveillance and control was profound. The victims experienced trauma, stress, and fear, yet they found ways to maintain a sense of identity and hope. Their ability to endure and adapt was a testament to human resilience, even in situations of prolonged captivity. This chapter also highlights the methods used by Castro to prevent discovery. The house was structured in a way that limited visibility from the outside. Soundproofing and careful placement of locks and barriers helped him maintain control while avoiding detection. Neighbors reported occasional unusual activity, but nothing prompted a decisive investigation. Inside the house, the three women lived under strict control and constant fear. Yet through observation, adaptation, and mutual support, they developed the tools necessary for survival. Their experiences reveal the calculated methods of the captor and the extraordinary resilience of those who endured years of confinement. Understanding life inside the house provides crucial context for the events that would eventually lead to escape and freedom. Over the years that Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus were held captive, multiple opportunities to intervene were missed. Neighbors reported unusual activity at the Seymour Avenue house, yet these warnings were not fully investigated. People described hearing screams, seeing the women in windows, and noticing unusual comings and goings. Some neighbors suspected that something was wrong, but no decisive action was taken. The outward appearance of normalcy, combined with Castro's careful control, made it difficult to recognize the house as a site of ongoing crimes. Law enforcement also faced challenges. Each of the missing person cases was initially treated separately. Investigators had limited evidence, and there was no apparent connection between the disappearances. These factors contributed to delays in understanding the pattern and the magnitude of the crimes. In addition, some reports to authorities were not thoroughly documented or acted upon. Visits to the house were made for unrelated issues, but no full search or investigation took place. These oversights allowed Castro to continue his crimes undetected for more than a decade. The failure to connect the cases highlighted systemic challenges in law enforcement at the time. Agencies were constrained by limited resources, procedural limitations, and gaps in communication between different departments. These factors, combined with Castro's careful concealment of his activities, contributed to the prolonged captivity of the victims. Community members expressed frustration and concern as the years passed. Families continued to advocate for their missing loved ones, raising awareness through flyers, media coverage, and public appeals. Yet despite growing awareness, the captives remained hidden inside the house, and the signs of abuse and confinement were largely overlooked. This chapter also examines the impact of these missed opportunities on the victims. Prolonged captivity without detection meant the women endured additional years of abuse, isolation, and fear. The failures of neighbors and law enforcement, though unintentional, prolonged their suffering and highlighted the importance of vigilance and follow-up in missing person cases. The case would later serve as a critical example of the importance of community awareness and effective law enforcement response. Lessons from the Cleveland kidnappings include recognizing warning signs, connecting seemingly separate incidents, and ensuring that reports from neighbors and concerned individuals are properly investigated. Missed opportunities and system failures allowed Ariel Castro to maintain control over the captives for more than a decade. These gaps in response underscore the need for vigilance, communication, and careful investigation. Understanding what was missed provides essential context for how the victims were eventually rescued and how justice was ultimately achieved. After more than a decade of captivity, a pivotal moment occurred on May 6, 2013, that would end the long nightmare for Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus. On that day, Amanda Berry managed to break free from the confines of the house on Seymour Avenue. Amanda had been observing her surroundings carefully, noting the routines of her captor. She identified a moment when one of the doors was not fully secured. Seizing the opportunity, she forced it open and ran to the street. Her courage and quick thinking were critical as she shouted for help to anyone nearby. A neighbor responded immediately to Amanda's cries. Police were called, and within minutes, they arrived at the house. Upon entering, officers discovered Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus still confined inside. The rescue was a culmination of years of endurance, planning, and silent resilience on the part of the victims. This escape brought widespread attention to the case. News outlets around the world reported the story, highlighting the extraordinary bravery of the women and the failure of authorities to uncover the crime sooner. Public reaction ranged from relief at the rescue to shock at the prolonged captivity that had gone unnoticed. The immediate aftermath involved law enforcement securing the scene, interviewing the survivors, and arresting Ariel Castro. Evidence collected from the house revealed the extent of the confinement, the abuse, and the control maintained over the victims for more than a decade. Amanda's escape also underscored the importance of observation and readiness in situations of prolonged captivity. Her awareness of her environment, her knowledge of her captor's routines, and her decisive action made the rescue possible. The escape demonstrated not only courage but also the strategic thinking that had developed over years of survival under extreme conditions. The impact on the community and the world was significant. Families who had endured years of uncertainty finally received closure. Law enforcement faced scrutiny and reflection on how the captor had remained undetected for so long. Discussions emerged about missing person protocols, neighbor vigilance, and the importance of connecting seemingly unrelated cases. The escape also marked the beginning of the recovery process for the victims. Following their rescue, Michelle, Amanda, and Gina received medical care, counseling, and support services. Their survival became a symbol of resilience and hope, inspiring attention to similar cases and highlighting the human capacity to endure even in extreme situations. Amanda Berry's escape changed everything. It ended years of confinement, brought the truth to light, and initiated a process of justice and healing. This moment serves as a testament to the courage of survivors and the importance of vigilance, awareness, and decisive action in uncovering hidden crimes. Following the escape on May 6, 2013, the focus shifted to justice, recovery, and understanding the full scope of Ariel Castro's crimes. Police quickly arrested Castro and charged him with multiple counts, including kidnapping, rape, and other serious offenses. The investigation revealed the full extent of the abuse endured by Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus over more than a decade. Evidence collected from the house confirmed the prolonged confinement, the manipulation, and the physical and psychological control exerted by Castro. The case shocked not only Cleveland but the entire nation, as the details of the crimes became public. Castro faced legal proceedings that moved swiftly. He was charged with more than 900 criminal counts, reflecting the severity and duration of his offenses. In August 2013, he pleaded guilty to the charges. The court sentenced him to life in prison plus 1,000 years, ensuring he would never be free to harm others again. 1 month later, Ariel Castro was found dead in his prison cell. His death marked the end of his ability to answer for his actions directly, but the focus remained on the survivors and their recovery. For Michelle, Amanda, and Gina, freedom marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. They received medical care, therapy, and support to address the trauma they had endured. Their paths to recovery were personal and ongoing, reflecting the complexity of healing from prolonged captivity and abuse. The survivors also began to share their experiences publicly, through interviews, books, and media appearances. Their stories became sources of education and inspiration, raising awareness about abduction, captivity, and the resilience of victims. Their willingness to speak out provided a voice for others who may have faced similar circumstances. The case also prompted changes in law enforcement practices, particularly regarding missing person investigations. Authorities recognized the need for improved communication between departments, better tracking of patterns, and more thorough follow-up on community reports and suspicious activity. The community of Cleveland responded with continued support for the survivors and increased vigilance to prevent similar crimes. Families, neighbors, and local organizations emphasized safety, awareness, and advocacy, learning from the events that had unfolded over more than a decade. The Cleveland kidnappings ended with freedom and justice, but the journey of recovery for Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus continues. Their stories are a testament to human resilience, the importance of vigilance, and the power of hope. They remind us that even after prolonged suffering, survivors can reclaim their lives, share their experiences, and inspire change in communities and systems. For 11 years, 3 women endured a darkness few could ever comprehend. Yet when the world finally learned the truth, their strength shone brighter than anything Castro tried to destroy. Their story is a reminder. Evil can hide anywhere, but so can bravery. And sometimes, hope survives even in the places we fear the most. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again for more powerful true crime documentaries that uncover the hidden stories behind the headlines.